Hey everybody, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at AppFuse developers and how to hire them. And, finding good developers can be, it can be a challenge. And if that sounds familiar, I highly recommend checking out theperfectdeveloper.com.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're fantastic for making the whole process a lot smoother. Now, before we get too far, I want to encourage everyone listening to try out their 5 questions tool. You can find it on their website, theperfectdeveloper.com. It's a really good way to kind of kickstart your search. Okay, so let's dive in.
Okay.
What exactly is AppFuse? I mean, it sounds pretty technical. What makes an AppFuse developer different from any other developer?
Well, think of it kind of like, those pre-built Lego sets.
Okay.
But for building web applications, that's essentially what AppFuse is. It's a Java framework that gives you all these ready-made pieces, templates, libraries, all the things you need for common web development tasks, like, user logins, database connections. Even the basic structure of your application AppFuse takes care of all that groundwork for you.
So you're not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
You're starting with a solid foundation.
Exactly. It's about saving time and effort.
Makes sense. But why couldn't any Java developer work with this? Why look for someone specifically called an AppFuse developer?
That's a good question. You see, any Java developer could technically work with AppFuse, but it's like asking a general contractor to build a house versus hiring someone who specializes in prefabricated homes.
No, okay, I see what you mean.
The specialist is going to be way faster and more efficient, right?
Yeah.
Because they know that system inside and out. AppFuse developers are those specialists. They understand how to really leverage AppFuse's features to build applications quickly and without cutting corners.
So it's more than just knowing Java. It's about mastering that framework.
Precisely. It's a specialized skill set.
Gotcha. So let's say I'm convinced and I want to start looking for an AppFuse developer. What are the key skills I should be looking for? How can I tell if someone really knows their stuff?
Okay, well, first off, strong Java skills are a must. I mean, that's the foundation. But beyond that, look for experience with Spring and Hibernate. Those are really tightly integrated with AppFuse. So a good AppFuse developer will be proficient in those as well.
So those are kind of must-haves.
Yeah, pretty much. They should also have experience with front-end technologies, things like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, because they'll be building user interfaces.
Right.
And problem-solving skills are crucial. You want to dig into that during the interview.
For sure.
Ask about challenges they've faced in past projects, how they approach problem-solving within the AppFuse framework.
So it's not just about ticking boxes. It's about how they apply that knowledge.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about the practical side of things. Hiring developers can be expensive. What kind of salary range am I looking at for an AppFuse developer? Does it vary a lot?
It does. You're right. Location, experience, the complexity of the project, all those things play a role. In the US, you're probably looking at somewhere between $80,000 to $130,000 per year. But that can go higher in those big tech hubs like San Francisco, New York.
So location really matters.
It does.
Okay, so I need to factor that into my budget. And speaking of budget, is it better to hire someone full-time or part-time for this? How do I even decide which is best?
It all depends on what you need. For long-term complex projects, something that needs ongoing work and a deep understanding of your goals. A full-time developer is usually the way to go. But for something smaller, or maybe you just need specific expertise for a limited time, part-time can be a good option. It's more cost-effective and flexible.
It's all about finding that balance.
Exactly. It depends on the scope of the work, your budget, and the level of commitment you're looking for.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
No one-size-fits-all answer. So where do I even find these AppFuse developers? Job boards, LinkedIn, are there specialized sites?
All of those are good options. You'll find people on those platforms. But I'd also recommend checking out those specialized developer networks, like theperfectdeveloper.com. They can be a game changer when it comes to finding the right talent.
So they kind of act as a matchmaker between developers and companies.
Exactly. They pre-vet their developers so you're getting quality. And they understand the nuances of different tech stacks. They can really streamline the hiring process.
And that saves a ton of time, especially when you're looking for something specific like AppFuse.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot already. We've talked about what AppFuse is, why you need these specialists, what skills to look for, and even touched on salary and different hiring models. But we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll dive deeper into the interview process and talk about how to structure your development team for success.
Sounds good.
See you in a bit.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
We were talking all about finding those AppFuse developers. And now I'm kind of curious about the actual interview process. How do you make sure someone really has the skills they say they do? How do you test them?
Yeah. That's the key, right? You need to see if they can walk the walk. So the best way to do that is to use a good mix of questions. Some technical to see if they have the knowledge, and some, more behavioral questions to see how they'd fit into a team.
So it's a balance of hard skills and those softer skills.
Exactly.
Okay, so walk me through that.
Yeah.
What kind of questions should I be asking to really gauge those technical skills?
Well, you got to start with the basics, right? Ask about their experience with Java, Spring Hibernate. Those are the core technologies for AppFuse development. But you don't want to just stop there. You got to dig deeper into their AppFuse specific knowledge.
So how do I do that? What kind of questions would help me get a sense of that?
You could ask things like, what are some common challenges you faced in past AppFuse projects? Or what are some best practices you follow when working with AppFuse? You could even present them with like a hypothetical scenario and see how they approach it. Get them to think through a problem within the AppFuse framework.
So it's about understanding how they think, not just what they know.
Right. It's about seeing if they can apply their knowledge in a real-world setting.
What about coding challenges? Are those helpful in this situation?
Oh, absolutely. A coding challenge, even a simple one, can tell you so much. You can see their coding style, their problem-solving approach. You can even do some pair programming if you want, where they work on a task alongside one of your developers.
Yeah, I like that. It's way more insightful than just asking them to describe what they've done.
Exactly. It shows you what they can do.
Now, you mentioned those behavioral questions earlier.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of those? Why are they important?
Well, they help you assess those soft skills. Communication, teamwork, problem solving. Those are just as important as the technical stuff,
Oh, yeah, for sure. You need someone who can actually work with others.
Right, exactly. So you ask about their past experiences, how they handled difficult situations, how they worked with other people.
So you're trying to get a feel for how they would fit into your team.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example of a good behavioral question? Like, what would you actually ask?
Sure. You could ask something like, tell me about a time you disagreed with a teammate on a technical decision. How did you resolve it? Or describe a project where you had to meet a really tight deadline. How did you manage your time? Did you deliver on time? Things like that.
I like that.
Oh, yeah.
It forces them to think back to real situations and how they handled things.
Exactly. It gives you real insight into their work style.
So much more helpful than just a generic, are you a team player question.
Totally. You want to know how they actually function in a team environment?
Now, speaking of teams,
Yeah.
I've been wondering about this. Should I be looking to hire a bunch of specialized developers, like front-end specialists, back-end specialists, or is there a different approach I should consider?
That's a great question. And honestly, it depends. It depends on how complex your project is, how big your team is. Sometimes those specialized roles make a lot of sense. You might have dedicated front-end developers who only focus on the user interface, back-end developers handling all that server-side logic, database specialists who just manage the data, that kind of thing.
So that's like the traditional way of doing things.
Yeah, pretty much. But you've probably also heard the term full-stack developer. That's become really popular lately.
Oh yeah, all the time.
And for good reason.
What exactly is a full-stack developer, though? And how do they fit into the AppFuse world?
So a full-stack developer is someone who can handle both the front end and the back end of an application. They can jump between those two worlds pretty seamlessly. And since AppFuse often involves working with multiple technologies, having developers with those full-stack skills can be really, really beneficial.
So instead of having all these separate specialists handing off work back and forth, you have these developers who can just move between different parts of the application as needed.
Exactly. And that can really streamline things. It can speed up development, reduce dependencies, improve communication. There are a lot of advantages.
I can see that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't a team of full-stack developers lack that deep expertise that you get from having specialists in certain areas?
Yeah, that's the trade-off, right? If you have a project with a really complex UI or something that needs some serious database optimization, then having dedicated specialists might be the better way to go.
Okay.
But for a lot of projects, the flexibility and efficiency of a full-stack team outweighs those concerns.
So it comes back to that idea of choosing the right team structure for the specific project.
Absolutely. There's no one right answer. It's about understanding your needs.
Now, what about seniority? Do I need a team of experienced veterans for this? Or can I mix in some junior developers to balance things out?
That's another important thing to think about. Senior developers, they bring that experience, they can hit the ground running. They're the problem solvers, the mentors, the ones who can anticipate those challenges.
They're the leaders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially on those complex projects. But of course, that experience comes at a cost.
Right.
They command higher salaries. So if you're building a whole team of senior devs, it's going to impact your budget.
For sure. So where do junior developers fit into this?
Well, junior developers might not have years of experience, but they're eager to learn, they're full of energy, and they can be really valuable, especially if you have those senior developers to mentor them and guide them.
So it's like an apprenticeship.
Kinda. They get to learn and grow within the team, and from a budget standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to bring in some junior developers.
Yeah, definitely. So win-win. But how do I make sure they're getting the support they need to actually develop their skills and grow as developers?
That's where those senior developers come in. They're the mentors. They provide guidance. They do code reviews. They offer support. They help those junior devs learn the ropes.
So it's about striking that balance between experience and cost effectiveness, while still creating opportunities for growth within the team.
Exactly.
This is all making a lot of sense. But I'm still curious about one thing. Where do I actually find these AppFuse developers? I mean, it's a pretty niche skill set. It can't be as easy as just posting on a general job board, right?
You're right. It does require a bit more of a targeted approach. Those traditional job boards like Indeed and LinkedIn, they can be good starting points, but you might have more luck with those specialized tech job boards. Or even niche communities and forums where Java and AppFuse developers hang out.
So you got to go where the AppFuse people are.
Exactly.
Any of those suggestions?
Don't underestimate the power of referrals. Talk to your network. Reach out to colleagues, former classmates, anyone you know who's in the Java world. You never know who might have a connection to the perfect AppFuse developer.
It's amazing how often the best candidates come from those personal recommendations.
It's true. And speaking of finding the best candidates, have you thought about using a developer network like theperfectdeveloper.com?
You've mentioned them a few times. They're the developer matchmaking service, right?
That's right. They specialize in connecting companies with pre-vetted developers who have the exact skills and experience they need. And they're really good at finding those niche developers like AppFuse specialists.
So they take a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. And they save you a ton of time, which is always a good thing.
Especially when you need someone quickly.
For sure.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand how to build a great AppFuse team. But before we move on, there's one last thing I wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about the importance of finding someone who's a good cultural fit. But what does that actually mean when we're talking about AppFuse developers?
That's a really good question. And it's something that a lot of people overlook. Cultural fit. It's not just about personality, you know. It's about finding someone who aligns with your company's values, their work style, their overall approach to software development.
So it's about finding someone who's going to thrive in your specific environment.
Exactly.
So if my company is all about collaboration and open communication,
Right.
I want an AppFuse developer who's comfortable with that.
Exactly. Someone who enjoys working in that kind of environment.
How do I assess that during the interview process, though? It seems a lot more subjective than evaluating their technical skills.
It is more nuanced for sure, but there are ways to get a sense of their cultural alignment. Start by describing your company culture during the interview. Talk about your team dynamics. See how they react to that. Do they seem interested? Do their values and their work style seem like a good fit?
So it's like a two-way street. We're assessing them, but
Yeah.
they're also assessing us.
Exactly. You got to be honest and transparent about your company culture.
Authenticity is key.
Absolutely.
I'm starting to see how important this is,
Yeah.
especially for those long-term projects where this developer is going to be a core part of the team.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Any other tips for finding that cultural fit?
Don't be afraid to go beyond the typical interview, you know. Maybe have an informal meeting or invite them to a social event. You can get a better sense of their personality that way, how they interact with others in a more relaxed setting.
I like that. It gives you a more holistic view of who they are. Well, this has been incredibly insightful. We've covered so much, from technical skills to team structure to cultural fit. I feel like I have a much better grasp on how to build a successful AppFuse team now.
That's great to hear.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious about what happens after you've actually hired someone. How do you make sure those AppFuse developers stay engaged? How do you keep them productive and happy and growing within the team?
It's a great question. Because you're right, it's one thing to attract talent, but keeping them engaged and motivated, that's how you build a really strong team.
Exactly. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
What are some key strategies for making sure our AppFuse developers feel valued and continue to grow?
Well, it starts with the environment. You got to create a workplace where they feel supported, where they have opportunities to learn and be challenged.
So give them projects that push them a little bit.
Yeah, give them ownership. Let them experiment with new tech. AppFuse developers, they're like any other developer. They thrive on challenge.
Makes sense. So it's not just about assigning tasks. It's about giving them room to grow.
Exactly.
What else can we do to encourage that growth?
Professional development is huge. Encourage them to go to conferences, take online courses, contribute to open source projects. Keep those skills sharp and give them opportunities to share what they know. Maybe do internal workshops or mentoring.
So invest in their growth, not just as developers, but as well-rounded professionals.
Right, because when they feel valued, they're more likely to stick around.
And contribute their best work.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
We've talked a lot about those hard technical skills. But what about soft skills? Things like communication, collaboration, problem solving. How do we help our AppFuse developers improve those areas?
Those are essential, no matter what kind of development you're doing. So you want to create a culture of open communication. Do pair programming code reviews, give each other constructive feedback.
So create an environment where everyone is learning and growing.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process.
This has been really eye-opening. I feel like I've learned so much about building a solid AppFuse team.
I'm glad to hear that.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we wrap up?
Just remember, finding and keeping great AppFuse developers. It's an investment, but it's an investment that pays off big time. These are the people who are building your web applications. They're bringing your vision to life.
It's true.
So treat them well. Give them opportunities to grow. And they'll reward you with amazing work.
Great advice. And if anyone out there is feeling a little overwhelmed by the whole process, remember, there are resources out there to help.
Absolutely.
Like theperfectdeveloper.com. They can make finding the right developers so much easier. So head over to theperfectdeveloper.com and try out their 5 questions tool. It's a great way to get started.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into hiring AppFuse developers.
It's been fun.
I hope everyone listening feels a little more confident about building their dream team. Until next time, happy coding, everyone.